Hello everyone and welcome to the Technion Data Solutions Data Pipeline webinar series. Today we have the pleasure of hosting two people from WhereScape, and they're going to take us through digital transformation with WhereScape and what this means with WhereScape. We'll just progress to the next slide. Let me just introduce the Data Pipeline webinar series for those of you who've been following these. You can see we've had 3 already, and the recordings for these are up on our website. Today we have the digital transformation with WhereScape. Next month in August, we have the cloud strategy and data pipeline. And then in September, we have a data pipeline strategy. This is all about how to properly put together a data pipeline, lining it with your business process and business strategy. Just some hygiene for the webinar. If you have questions as we go, as most people do, please use the question and answer panel in the Zoom webinar. And we'll either answer these at the time or at the end, depending on what makes sense. But if you can log the questions there, that way when we respond, everybody sees the answers as well. And we'll have a nice question and answer session at the end. So just a quick introduction for people who are new to Technion. Who is Technion? We'll just click on to the next. So firstly, as the company, keep clicking. We're a full service data consulting firm. We've been around for a bit over 20 years, based in Texas. We've got a very wide customer base across every industry, from government, healthcare, finance, everything you can possibly imagine, airlines, even defense contracts. About 65 staff, most of those are in the consulting practice. We have 4 practices. The first is data pipeline, which is what this webinar falls under. This is about getting data from your transactional operational systems into your analytic systems. Second practice is data visualization. This is about presenting it to your end users. So dashboarding, reporting, analytics. The third one is data science. We have a very strong data science practice headed up by a mad scientist we stole from one of the universities. So the data science is about saying less about what happened yesterday, but using yesterday to tell us about tomorrow. And finally, we have a data governance practice. For those of you who are who have mature warehouses and are starting to struggle with data governance issues, we'd love to talk to you about that. We're widely recognized within the industry. We have a recognition from WhereScape as a Partner of the Year from 2019, Alteryx the same, Tableau, Snowflake. We are, in fact, we're the largest implementer of WhereScape projects in the world. So what I'd like to do now, and we've enough about Technion, let's introduce our speakers from WhereScape. We have Stan, and Stan heads up product development for WhereScape, and so he's deeply into what's coming up and how WhereScape works. And so if you have questions around roadmap and product functionality, Stan is the guy. And the second speaker we have is Glenn Dawson. Now Glenn, we're very lucky to have him. He's actually with the European WhereScape team. He's a WhereScape guru, and he's very kindly offered to do a demo within our webinar today. So to welcome both Stan and Glenn. And Stan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Michael. So what we're going to talk about today, I mean, the title is digital transformation, and digital transformation is a broad term, but we're really what we're going to focus on as far as digital transformation is data automation. What used to be called data warehouse automation has now moved into more of what we like to call data platform automation. And as a result, you know, as the title says, what we're going to do is kind of lay some groundwork, talk about things that are going on right now, you know, in the space. Don't worry, it's not going to be a pure product, sell. I'm not trying to say you anything, but we'll talk about how WhereScape fits into this, because I think it gives a good framework of reference for how these concepts play out. So, we have the traditional data platform, and in this case, what I use is the data warehouse platform, where you've got data sources across an organization in different areas, everything from ERP, finance, customer relationship management, things like Salesforce. We've got all of these disparate data sources. In the typical data warehouse and ETL approach, we would pull data from all of these silos, put them in a staging area, maybe do some transformations, data cleansing, things like that, push those into maybe an operational data store or a central data warehouse where, we complete everything, put everything in the kitchen sink in there. And then you have data consumers off of, the central warehouse and these operational data stores being, cubes, data marts, reporting tools, any of your traditional BI tools and analytics tools, data science, things like that. So, that's kind of the traditional data platform as we all know and love, built off of Inman and Kimball. And now we've got the Data Vault 2.0 methodologies. But one of the things that's come along, in the past, organizations have managed their data on premise, where data sources are present, in these local databases and bound by network, firewalls. But, over the last few years, the growing pain of traditional on-premise data platform has led to things like performance issues, workload contention, et cetera. One of the most common outcomes is longer run times of user reports, analytics, things like that. These things could time out or hang up without completion as the amount of data grows. And typically companies have to work around, these limitations with options like changing the data load processes, putting together small aggregate data sets, data marts here and there, subject matter, data stores, things like that. So the rise of new, there's also, so keep that in mind. We've got this on premise, but the other thing that's caused, the data growth is new data sources and the growing trend. We always hear Internet of Things, and this has a huge impact on analytics in general, and most of that data is unstructured and there's huge volumes of it. And, obviously that poses challenges to designing, data sets and databases in traditional database practices. And as a result, this makes, these newer cloud platforms a perfect location to store and integrate the data. Michael talked about, Snowflake, but certainly Snowflake's not the only cloud. You've got things like Redshift and Google BigQuery now. Azure, what used to be called Azure Data Warehouse, I believe it's Azure Synapse now. These are purpose-built cloud analytics databases or data stores. So the traditional on-premise data platforms have become expensive in terms of hardware and administration, and you need a team of dedicated database administrators and design experts to monitor and maintain the system. This is where the cloud data platforms provide flexibility and eliminates that upfront cost by providing the pay-as-you-go pricing option. It used to be the pay-as-you-go, when things first came out, as you got sticker shock after a couple months because you were like, oh my God, my bill went through the roof as I started using these cloud-based platforms. But we in general, we meaning the enterprises, have gotten better at the workloads that they put out there and keeping track of this. And the other thing that we found is that statistics have shown that storage costs, which could be one of the most expensive components of cloud platforms, have considerably declined over the past few years. Data storage is getting cheaper, thereby proving that integrating data in the cloud is becoming easier. So, all of that to say the cost is going down. But what these cloud platforms give us is it takes all of the stuff that we have to do in an on-premise environment out of the hands of the enterprise and puts it onto the platform provider. The other thing we're seeing is streaming data platforms, and this could be cloud-based, this could be on-premise based. Basically, you know, enterprises are looking at real-time data as a fuel that drives better outcomes from applications. And we see this in areas like fraud detection, cybersecurity, machine learning, supply chain optimization, and those type of environments where, you know, enterprises want access to this real-time data to do real-time analytics on top of it. And the challenge for IT teams is how to incorporate these data sources and streaming technology into existing analytic environments, you know, so that they're quickly and easily accessible to the business. You know, when you combine automation with streaming, it minimizes the learning curve for IT teams and reduces the complexity of managing, you know, these hybrid of streaming and traditional batch-based data. You know, with streaming data automation, you can deliver real-time data at the speed of the business. And, you know, this graphic here is just kind of an example of what you're looking between real-time processing and batch-based processing. And, you know, what goes on with the real-time data and getting data into the data warehouse or data marts in real time. So the other platform I wanted to talk about, and I kind of split this out from data warehouse and streaming, is this big data platform. And, you know, we hear that term thrown around all the time, data lakes, things like that. You know, I often think of a data lake as just a big bucket to hold all your unstructured data or anything we can't fit into a relational model, and throw it in that bucket, and so people can get access to it. And that's probably an oversimplified definition, but that's kind of the way I think about it. You know, and given traditional data platforms, you know, they're not optimal for big data use. You know, IT teams must know how to look, use, and or integrate non-traditional or newer environments within their data infrastructure that are better suited to larger unstructured data. This is the challenge that IT finds today. Data platforms such as Hadoop, Azure Data Lake, Amazon S3, and some of the others out there. You know, big data integration involves integrating, you know, these newer data sources. You know, we talked about streaming. You've got graph data, you've got NoSQL data. You know, all this stuff is now being processed, you know, through analytics platforms. You know, organizations, you know, success or benefit from big data doesn't come if all that big data remains siloed. So integrating some or all of your big data with your smaller current enterprise data sets and sources can provide, you know, a much broader insight into the organization and the operation of the business. The good thing is big data integration doesn't require big budgets or months or years to accomplish. You know, with automation, you can ease the learning curve and speed up the design, development, deployment, and operation of the big data integration. You know, thereby delivering, you know, these projects within your organization factor and with less cost and risk. So, you know, in this picture here, you know, you've got analytical apps that are feeding. You've got scoring and modeling, you know, through machine learning and analytics, data science. You know, and all of this, and you can see where the data lake fits in here, but that doesn't mean that data warehouse and some of the other platforms don't go away. And one of the key things about this, and we'll talk about this later, is you see there is the metadata. Without the metadata, how do you know what data is available there through your data platform? So I thought this was interesting. I actually just came across this recently. McKinsey & Company put out a kind of a research or whatever you want to call it, where they said there are 6 foundational shifts that companies are making to their data architecture blueprints that enable more rapid delivery of new capability and vastly simplify existing architecture approaches. So, and I think that fits in nicely with this notion of, with the notion of the automation part. You know, and these things, these foundations, typically they touch on nearly all data activities, from acquisition to processing to storage to analysis to exposure. You know, even though organizations can implement, you know, some of these shifts while leaving their core technology stack intact, many require, you know, re-architecting of the existing data platform and infrastructure. including both legacy technology and newer technologies that were previously bolted on to the environment. So, automation, this is where automation fits in. Automation is part of this. But organizations have to have a clear data strategy while investing in the right level of sophistication. McKinsey & Company states that the return on investment can be significant. They gave out an example where they had worked with a client and they saw more than $500 million annually in return on investment in the case of one U.S. bank, and 12 to 15% profit margin growth in the case of an oil and gas company. And these benefits typically come in the areas of IT cost savings, productivity improvements, reduced regulatory and operational risk, and delivery of new capabilities, services, and even entire businesses being built on top of this. And so why do I go over this? Because as we talk later in the presentation, we'll talk about automation and what it does, and the benefits of automation fall into these areas of IT cost savings, productivity improvements, regulatory, all of those things. So the six foundational shifts are on the bottom. You go from on-premise to cloud-based. You can go from on-premise to cloud-based data platforms, batch to real-time data processing, integrated solutions to a modular best-of-breed approach, point-to-point, from point-to-point to data pipelines to decoupled data access, and to go from a traditional enterprise warehouse to a domain-based architecture. And that's where we start talking about things like data fabric. And the last point is to go from a rigid data model, like a relational data model, or to flexible, extensible data schemas. And this is where we see, things like Data Vault, for example. If you're not familiar with that, go out there and look up Dan Lindstadt, Data Vault 2.0. It's one of the newer methodologies for and a more flexible data schema than some of the traditional Kimball Inman type fact dimension schemas that we typically see. So we talked about the key changes. This is just kind of a summary of what I talked about the six things that are the key changes. So what are the value? What's the value of making these types of changes and incorporating data automation, data platform automation, data warehouse automation? Fast track delivery of data infrastructure projects, boost developer productivity. We've seen here with WhereScape a boost of productivity from BI data database developers of 5-fold. The project risk goes down when using tools like WhereScape, and it lowers the cost. You're able to collaborate more effectively with the business users because of things like metadata, data lineage, data governance capabilities. Data automation fits right in with an agile approach to data warehousing or maintaining these data platforms. The other thing is the ability to tame hybrid on-premise and cloud data environment complexity. It's kind of, you're able to kind of hide the complexity of those environments. And you leverage a wide variety of data sources, including real-time data, as we talked about. So this is nothing more than you see the data warehouse lifecycle from scope and planning to deploy into production and impact analysis. Here, so you go from scope to planning all the way down, and all these little arrows just show where things feed back. And the three overlying things that over all of these are documentation, metadata management, DevOps management, and project management. So you can see, there's a lot of complexity in this data warehouse lifecycle. And for stupid people like me who have to have it boiled down into much simpler, you've got the business need, which fit into the requirements. You've got the blueprint, which fits into your logical model. You've got the framework, which is your physical model. You've got the ELT, ETL part, which is the systems work. The finished work is when you deploy it. and then you declare it's open, and that's, then you have operations that maintain that environment. And then you've got CI, continual improvement, finance coming and saying, hey, we've got this new Hyperion cube with this data, we need it in the data warehouse. That's important. And in order to be able to do that, you've got to have documented your data sources and data stores. And then you have the owner manual. So where does automation fit in there? With companies like what we do at WhereScape, we have this full cycle automation across all of these. So Michael Tantrum has named this the staircase of death. And all this is just to show all of the parts that go into this data platform lifecycle and all of the tools that fit into each one of these parts. And you'll see there's a lot of things in this stair step across, and then data governance fits along the entire length of that staircase. But you'll see all of the tooling set. And so, keep in mind in your head, expense, expertise, resources, and some of these tools don't even integrate. So then you've got to deal with that too. But all of these types of tools are involved in the process of building these data platforms. And, at WhereScape, we say it's overcomplicated and this is inefficient. It's expensive, requires a lot of resources, a lot of expertise, and it's almost impossible to maintain long-term. So I thought this was interesting. If you look at the Data Warehouse Institute, known as TDWI, they define data platform automation as using technology to gain efficiencies and improve effectiveness in data warehousing processes. Data platform automation is much more than simply automating the development process. And that's something to keep in mind. It's much more than that. It encompasses all of the core processes of data warehousing, including design, development, testing, deployment, operations, impact analysis, and change management. Sometimes it gets confused, especially with data ops or DevOps, that, it's more than just automating the development process. That's the easy part. It's being able to automate the other core processes that go into the data warehouse or data platform. That's important. So let's talk about data platform automation. And basically, we go from discovery to design. Oops. Let's go back. You go from discovery, basically understanding the data sources and quality, to design, which is automate, model, and processing generation, to develop, generate consistent, robust, and stable code with automation, optimized for whatever your target data platform is. And then you deploy. And then you go to that operational phase, and then you go to the enhance, and this cycle continues over and over again. So data platform automation, software that provides data platform automation combines the use of metadata, so it's meta-driven, has the common data warehouse methodologies as whether as some of the big data methodologies and things like Data Vault, pattern detection, and more, in order to help developers auto-generate data platform designs and coding. And then through this data platform design tools, and provides time-saving development, obviously. So by using these data platform automation to address much of the time, what we call the time-intensive repetitive work previously required, in hand coding, developers can instead focus on the more strategic elements of the data platform and making sure that its delivery will meet the evolving needs of the business. So it takes the burden of the development and all of the day-to-day, grunt work off of that, and allows, the developers to focus on the strategic stuff. And as I talked about, data platform automation, we've seen 5-fold increase. So what does it bring to the organization? Well, with the ability to automate as much as 80% of the data platform life cycle, IT teams can deliver more quickly, the data platforms, as well as easily adapt existing data platforms as the business needs changes. And this is key because my background is in business intelligence and data architecture and BI architecture and things like that. And, it's taken, I've worked on projects taking a year to build a data warehouse. And the minute you turn it loose to the organization, it's obsolete. It's totally obsolete because, when you build a data warehouse, especially around, if you're using Kimball, for example, with dimensions and facts, your business rules are are explicitly built based on the relationships between the data. Well, over a year's time, some of those business rules have changed or modified over time. Thereby, your relationships within the data, by the time you finish, are outdated. So now you've got to go and be able to make changes. Pile that on top of the fact that, you've got parts of the organization coming and saying, hey, we need this data within the data platform for reporting. So there's this constantly need to change within these data platforms. Data platform automation can also reduce the learning curve associated with implementing a new data platform within an organization. And traditionally developers, who are coding, homegrown coding in these projects would need a deep knowledge of a lot of aspects of any of the new platforms. Well, data platform automation specifically designed for the platform can mask much of that complexity. So the other thing to note is the data platform automation solutions like WhereScape, also provide organization with best practice standardization that's often lacking in most organizations when working with, a variety of development approaches, methodologies, and staffing. And thorough documentation is also available through our documentation and metadata, and it's provides valuable takeaway for organizations using the platform automation. Not to mention, things like data governance and compliance and regulatory. This is just, showing you we have two basic products. We have the 3D product, which falls under the design category, which then feeds to our WhereScape Red, which is kind of our what I call the engine, develop, deploy, and operate part. So you've got internal data sources, external data sources, big data sources, streaming, those things feed into the WhereScape products, which, then, the design product is the 3D product, which can then push designs into WhereScape Red and build the kind of the framework or infrastructure for building and maintaining and automating these data platforms that are the target. And, we support a lot of the leading industry platforms, including Snowflake, Amazon Redshift, Teradata, SQL Server, Oracle DB2, Hadoop, and more. And, we're constantly adding new platforms. We've got Google BigQuery, for example, coming out. We support Redshift. And those platforms, sit there, and then, typically enterprises will build their reporting tools on top of that. So just a brief overview of WhereScape Red, and I like to start with that first because that's basically the engine. It allows you to develop, document, deploy, support, and maintain the entire data platform. And you'll see the three underlying areas across all of the parts are robust metadata platform, a documentation platform, and then a scheduler. Scheduler being the ability to schedule your updates to your target. And, you start with your data sources, which then go to the loading tables, any transformations of that data, and then it goes into the data foundation. And the data foundation is based on your modeling technique through 3D. You can do third normal form, Inman Kimball. You can use Data Vault. You can use data lake, big data type schemas, for example, that are built within the 3D product. And then and that feeds into Red, which then builds all of the staging and areas that are needed. And then, you know, if you've built in business transformations, those occur, and then it pushes the data out into the target. And the thing to note here is that, you know, one thing, sometimes automation tools like WhereScape get confused with ETL tools. WhereScape does not actually, we don't actually touch the data, we manage the framework. So we're not an ETL tool, so there's no data pipeline. But what we do build is the framework and the automation components that are used to move the data from source to target. So what this provides is an integrated development environment from source to target, industry best practices for history, you know, things like history surrogate keys, indices that you commonly see. There's a metadata repository with version control, has full auditability, automated documentation of data models, data lineage, business glossary, automated code generation, and the freedom for customized developers to go in there and customize any code that's been automated. You know, a lot of our customers like to go in there, put in transforms, data cleansing, things like that. Well, they can add that into the automated code if they need to. If we look at WhereScape 3D, WhereScape 3D supports a handful of design for analytic environments. Basically, it has data discovery, profiling, and common things when you're looking at your data sources. And you can see here, we support a variety of data sources. You know, it supports designing and testing, revising, enhancing data models with a user interface. You can determine the impact of changes based on data lineage information that's housed in the data, our metadata repository. You can create and maintain your source systems and design documentation also based on the metadata, because we keep a robust list of information within our metadata repository. And it integrates with the WhereScape Red data platform so that you can rapidly promote your designs from the 3D product to Red to make changes to your target platform and your process for loading. And, you know, what does this do? Well, one of the things, it empowers agile development. The 3D supports agile development methodologies and iterative design because it automates the time-consuming tasks such as change detection in source and the target environments. It supports industry design best practices we talked about. It describes support for normalized data platforms like dimensional data marts, while also supporting things like data vault design schemas. It has support for database constructs such as tables, views, indexes, things you commonly see in third normal form. It allows for design and testing of target data models through iterative cycles. And we talked about it has data platform discovery and documentation. So you can go out there to a source that you're thinking about bringing into your target data platform and do data discovery and also document that source for use later. So in a nutshell, you know, well, let's talk about, so who cares about this? You know, these are the people within your organization that would be interested in automation. You know, in other words, they have a vested interest in successful implementation of their data and analytics platforms. And, you know, if you notice, we could tie all of these roles to the functions and tools used to build and maintain the data warehouse in those traditional environments. And, you know, these roles include DBAs. You know, these are the folks who manage the data platforms, both the data sources and data targets. They're responsible for deployment testing and problem solving. You know, so the tools that like WhereScape provides in the data platform automation are critical and make their job easier. You've got the BI database developers who build, you know, ELT for ingestion into data platforms. They're responsible for changing and updating, you know, what we commonly call continuous integration in the DevOps space. You know, you know, we talked about some of that functionality that falls into the data automation capabilities of the WhereScape products. You've got BI and data architects, for example. You know, they're responsible for design of the data platform ecosystem. They identify data elements, governance. They're interested in, you know, business glossaries, documentation, regulatory, around the data elements, you know, and those are the people that are interested in things like, you know, the 3D product, where that's where a lot of our robust metadata comes from and allows you to manage the design and deployment of your data platform ecosystem. Obviously, executives are interested because we save money, streamline projects, streamline resources, cut down on the tooling. You know, these are the people that write the checks and fund and sponsor typically these projects. And like I said, they're concerned with saving money and speed to value. You know, that was the first thing when I saw WhereScape. I was like, because having been a practitioner in this space, you know, all I could see was speed to value. I can get value quickly through automation. And another category is data analysts. You know, those are the users of your data platforms. You know, they provide input for ELT, ETL definition, you know, data definition and design. You know, a tool like 3D is a collaborative tool for people like data analysts and BI and data architects and database developers to be able to go out, profile data for potential sources, bring that metadata into, and then be able to go in and use that metadata in through the design and deployment of the data models. I mean, through of the data platforms. So that's a kind of a quick whirlwind tour of data automation as WhereScape sees it. You know, kind of how our tools fit around this notion of data automation, the value, you know, what it brings to the table and what it provides. And so what I'm going to do is turn this over to Glenn, who's going to actually show you using the WhereScape tool what data automation looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Glenn.
Great. Thanks very much, Stan. Hope you can all hear me okay. You've seen this slide before. It's our architecture slide. I like to start things off here. I'll spend a minute in here and then I'll get on and I'll go through the demonstration.
Glenn, you need to share your screen.
Okay, you're seeing it now.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so this is the architecture slide. As I said, you've seen this before. Really quick overview of what we do. It's all about automating the process of building the kind of models that you see there, as Stan has already said. So your data vaults, your 3NFs, your star schemas, automating the DDL generation, the code generation, the loading process, everything about building your data warehouse in an automated fashion is what we do at WhereScape. Okay, metadata driven. So you'll see me go through and I'll be building things. And as I'm building things, metadata will be captured, useful for track back information, documentation, being able to port your metadata from one environment to another, taking code from development, pushing it into production very, very quickly. And obviously we have our scheduler tool as well that enables you to build jobs and tasks and load the structures and things that you've built using WhereScape. Now, there's two tools, WhereScape Red and WhereScape 3D. 3D offers a model-driven approach, but today we're going to focus on WhereScape Red, which uses a data-driven approach to building your solution. Okay, so that's where we are now. We are actually in WhereScape Red, and this is the front end, split into 4 different panes. Over on the right-hand side, this is where I will typically look at my databases, so my target database, my source database, or my list of files. So to show you what that looks like, I just need to browse my connections. Today's demonstration, by the way, is going to be targeting Snowflake, and I'm going to take some files from an Amazon S3 bucket and a SQL Server database as well. So I have some connections here. These are just ODBC connections. Let me browse my first one, which happens to be my Amazon S3 bucket. And over on the right-hand side, you should see I have access to a number of files. And in this directory, I have some pipe separated files. Okay, so the left-hand side, you'll see the target object types that you create in WhereScape. So the meta objects, we land the data, we use an ELT approach, as Stan mentioned earlier. We extract and we load from the sources into the target using a load table. We have stage, we have views for building transformations, so the T of the ELT. And then depending on what you're building, whether you're having a foundation layer, whether you're building hubs, links, and satellites of a data vault, whether you're building a historized data store objects model, or whether you're going straight into facts and dimensions, will determine what you use. But the process is fairly similar, regardless of what your target is. So on the left-hand side, you choose your target object type. In this case, it's going to be load. I'm going to take my product file from my S3 bucket, drag it onto the center pane, which is the drag and drop zone. I'll give it a unique name. So that's the name of the table that's going to be landed into, created into Snowflake, accepting the default location, my target schema in Snowflake, and the data type mappings. So let me choose add. And then what will happen is a wizard will come up and it will ask me to confirm the structure of the file. So it's pipe separated and the first row is a header. And then all I need to do is review the names. So the names of the columns have been picked up from the file. Obviously at this stage, I could change them if I wanted to. I could also change the data types. I could add transformations, but everything looks good. I'll regenerate my code and I'll create and load this interactively right now. So basically, by using the drag and drop approach, we've generated the DDL, which has pushed the creation of the table out into Snowflake in this case. We've created the loading script, and then the final part of the interface you can now see is the results pane, and you can actually see the messages that have come back from Snowflake. So you can see the create table statement that's been pushed out. You can see that we've added comments onto some of the columns, and you can see we copied the file from the S3 bucket into Snowflake. Okay, so let me just have a look and display the data, and hopefully you'll see now we have data in this table. We have a couple of additional columns as well added. We have a record source that we added and a load date. So effectively for that table, we have extracted and loaded from the source into the target. Now let me do that again. This time I'm going to change my connection and I'm going to browse a SQL Server source system. So let me do that. I have another connection here. And this time, instead of seeing files, we'll see tables. I'm going to take my categories table this time. I'm going to drag it onto a load table. Again, the same process. I'll give it a unique name, accepting all of the defaults here. Obviously, we could go in and we could add incremental load filters. We could change the columns, etc. But we don't have a lot of time. So let's whiz through these options. And again, the same process is happening. We're generating the DDL, we're generating the load script, we're loading the data, and very shortly you will see that the data has landed into Snowflake. Okay, and there you can see in the results exactly what's happened. The process would be the same if we were coming from Teradata or from Oracle, all of the other kind of sources that Stan was talking about earlier. Right, so the next step is I need to change my view on the right-hand side. And now let's have a look at our target. So let's actually browse our Snowflake connection, so our target, and we should now see a number of schemas. Okay, so a number of schemas here. My load schema is where those load tables arrived, and you can see I have my categories table on my products table that's been landed into Snowflake. So I'm going to now stage the data. I'm going to join these two tables together in a stage table. So first of all, again, it's the same process. I'm dragging from a load table onto a stage table, dragging across, accepting, let me just use the right one. It's this one here. I'm going to drag that across onto a stage table, accepting the default name and the default schema. I'm going to choose add, and I'm going to click OK. Now at this point, this is just metadata because I want to go to my categories table and I want to add some additional information. So I'm going to take category name and I'm going to take description. Okay, so I'm adding those into the stage. And I'm also going to build a very quick transformation on product name. Now, there was a question about how do you build transformations. So let's go in and build a transformation. This is just a standard SQL style transformation. Let's turn that particular column into uppercase. Let's paste that in, choose OK. And now we're ready to go. So now I can create the table. So again, the DDL is being generated. And now I can generate my code. So let's go through and build this. Now, first of all, we need to think about the sources. There's not just one source here, there's two. So I need to resolve my join. So these two tables here make up the join. I drag them across onto the design phase, and then I can just take my category ID column and drag it across. So effectively, that builds us our join. We can review the join here. We can change it to an inner and outer. We could also go in and customize this join here. I'm just going to go finish, OK, and now I should be able to execute this. Okay, so again, very quickly, wizard driven. We've answered questions and we have code. And behind the scenes, of course, there is a SQL script that's doing this loading for us. The final bit for today is to now generate a dimension. So I'm just going to refresh my schemas on the right hand side, and now we'll see that stage table. Here it is. And now I'm just going to drag this onto a dimension. Okay, so dragging that across again, accepting all the defaults. I'll go for a normal dimension, so type 1 dimension. I'll build the code. I'll create and load. There's one final question we need to answer, and that's what is the business key? The business key is product ID. Of course, it could be a composite key if we wanted. And if we were building a type 2, we would just have a different option here to ask us about the change detection columns. So let's choose OK. And again, the same process, DDL, code, and it's being executed. And now if we look at the data behind the scenes, we can actually display the data in our dimension. And you can see we have all of the data from the two source tables. So we have our category information, we have the joins, we have the surrogate key, we have an unknown row. And what I can also do is I can look at my lineage. So let's have a quick look. Let's do a track back on this particular table. And there you can see my lineage. Now it's very basic lineage today because obviously we haven't gone via any data vault or via any historized ODS layer. But typically you might see more stage tables depending on how complex. And of course, these stage tables can be views as well. They don't have to be physical tables. Back to my object, we can now also have a look at the code as well. So let's just go and browse the code. And this is a script based on a template. A template can be modified. So of course, if you want to change the structure of this code, if you don't want to use a merge, if you want to use insert into, if you want to change the way this code is structured, you just need to change the templates. But there's the code for our type 1 dimension. And let's now look at some of the other objects as well. So you can see also there's been some other data warehouse objects that have been built beforehand. You can see I have some fact tables here. Let's pick on this one, for example. Perhaps this was built by somebody else. I'd forgotten how the structure looks. So let's build a trackback diagram on this. So I'll give you an example of some more advanced lineage. And in this case, you can see we do in fact go via a foundation layer. So we land the data into Snowflake, and then we build two ODS tables, which are capturing the history of the source. And the process is exactly the same. I would have dragged onto these objects. It would have been the same kind of questions. More stage tables, one to do the join, one to look up the surrogate keys for the fact. But let's also look at another alternative. So I have two fact tables here in the solution. And let's choose this one. Now this one appears to be more complex and it's actually the same fact table, but the only difference here is that we've built a data vault data foundation layer model. So again, we landed the data, we loaded the data, we dragged from our sources. This time we had a stage table on top of each of these loads that build us the hash keys that enable us to build the hubs, links, and satellites. And finally, we had a view that stitched everything back together. A final stage table where we looked up the surrogate keys, and then our fact table again. So we could have built this again if we'd had a little bit longer for the demonstration. We could have built all of this here very, very quickly too. Other points here is documentation. So what we can do, we can document our entire solution that we have here. So let's create the documentation. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to generate us some HTML pages of our entire solution. So it will document all the objects, not just the objects that we built today. It usually takes a few seconds. Now we can go in and we can display this. You can display this outside of WhereScape. You can customize the logos. You can look at this in a browser, add it to your SharePoint, for example, make it available to everybody in your organization. These are all the objects. These are the fact tables. Again, let's choose that fact table. You can see all of the dimensions. You can see the columns, where the columns are sourced from, the star schema. You can see the lineage as well, going via the data vault. We can navigate the diagram. We can even go in and look at the code. So this is available completely offline if you wanted to see this away from the database. So very, very powerful stuff. Other DevOps kind of operations. Quickly, I will just show you our dimension that we generated here. Let's build a diagram again from it. What we could do is we could say we want to publish this into production now. So all I need to do is build an application, and an application contains the structures of this solution. You can see here all the scripts that are needed. I choose OK. We have some files that are generated. I could then go into my admin tool and reload this and push this very, very quickly into production. And the other thing is the scheduler. You've seen me interactively load this, but obviously if there was lots of data in this model, we'd need to send this to the scheduler. So I can create a job from this diagram. Let's choose OK. And there you can see my load tables, my stage, and my dimension all added in the right order into a job. And then once I have that, I can refresh my scheduler. You can see that there. And then I can start the job. Obviously, I can schedule it to run daily, weekly, monthly, however you want to do this. So let's just kick that off now. And that job will now populate that particular dimension. Okay, very quick tour. Obviously conscious of time. I think there's going to be some questions now. But that's the approach. WhereScape Red, it's all about fast, dragging and dropping, agile, getting the data out to the end user very, very quickly. The tool building the code, the tool building the DDL for you, and the tool generating the documentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. It's an awesome, awesome demo. Now, we've got the question and answer panel open, so feel free if you've got questions for Glenn or for Stan, and we'll take those now. Also, this has been a very brief demo, but if this has piqued your interest and you'd like to know a little bit more or have a more detailed demo, feel free to reach out to us. Use either the links when you were invited to the webinar, or we'll have a slide up at the end with some contact details, and we'd love to talk further with you and see how we can apply automation in your world to help you transform your existing data warehouse project, or even move into a newer, perhaps a cloud-based approach or something like that. So perhaps while people are entering questions or typing questions, we could put up a couple of polls. Rachel, do you want to put up a poll? Okay, so the first one, if you'd like to interact with this one, what does your existing data warehouse infrastructure look like? So feel free to click on that. This is just a fun thing we like to do and we can show the results to see what everybody's doing. We'll leave that up for a few seconds. And such, and also, yeah, feel free to bring your questions as well. Okay, Rachel, do we want to show the results of this one? Okay, yeah, so as we would expect, we have people from all levels of maturity, so people with no data warehouse all the way through to a mature data warehouse. And WhereScape works incredibly well in all those situations. A lot of times we do what we call data warehouse 2.0, the second iteration through of a data warehouse where the existing one becomes too hard to manage without good metadata and good governance. Okay, should we try the next poll, Rachel? Okay, this is about cloud aspirations. Stan's talked a lot about cloud and how that's become the future of data warehousing. So perhaps let's interact with what you guys in your organization are doing. Are you on-premise only? And there's lots of very good reasons to be just an on-premise only data warehouse. And there's also very good reasons to go to the cloud. So just interesting to see all of our attendees and where your aspirations are for the cloud. So Glenn, we're not getting many questions, so your demo must be incredibly clear and awesome. So, okay, Rachel, let's have a look there. Yeah, okay, so this is very, very typical. A lot of people are actively moving to the cloud, and a lot of people are also have chosen to remain on-premise. That's good. Okay, so you have my contact details on the screen there. I'd love to talk to you more about what WhereScape might look like in your world. We have at Technion, we have extensive experience, as I say, with WhereScape and just helping you get stuff done. One of the biggest issues that data warehouses have is customers say it just takes too long and it's just too expensive. And how can we do it differently? Because our business users are losing patience with us, and our funding people, our CFOs, are saying this has cost a lot of money. And so using an automation tool, it allows your developers and your IT people to focus on what you actually need a human brain for. Talking to users, talking to source system people, understanding what your data quality issues are, deciding what sort of data model you want, but you're not building code, you're not building tables, you're not writing documentation. The machinery is doing that for you. Okay, well, in the absence of any other questions, Stan and Glenn, thank you very, very much for joining our webinar series and interesting educational talk and demo. And for those people on the call, you'll get a video recording to share with your colleagues. So thanks everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a future webinar series.